Hey guys, it's Murphy's Opinions here, and today I'm coming at you with a brand new video. And today I thought I would do something a little special. Obviously for I did the George Harrison ranking video for his albums, and I released it on his birthday. So I thought I'd do something for Paul McCartney as well, for his birthday. So I've recorded this a few days before. I'm gonna try and just go through his. This time I'm not gonna do album rankings. I'll do that later on in the year, I think, but. So I kind of want to think about that before I really start ranking the albums. But what I thought I would do is I'd do a discography. So I'll go through all his albums, his studio albums, and just sort of say my favorite and least favorite song. I'm not really going to try and be. I mean, still going to try and do album reviews, but these are just sort of a quick summary sort of videos where I'm just going to say like, I've seen people do this online before. Just say a song I like, as I said, and a song that my least favorite. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into first of many albums on this discography. So first off, we kick off the discography with Paul McCartney's first album titled McCartney from 1970. So I think as far as sort of my favourite track goes for this, obviously there's some really great songs on here. Like That Would Be Something Every Night, Junk, Man He Was Lonely, Teddy Boy, but I think my favorite track I'm going to go for on this album is Maybe I'm Amazed. I definitely would say that's probably my favorite McCartney song of all time throughout his solo career. Um, it's just a really beautifully written song, great guitar, great drumming. Everything about that song I just think is fantastic. A really, really awesome song. And then as far as my least favorite goes, there's a few sort of instrumental tracks on here that kind of aren't that great. But I think if I was to pick one, I'd probably say Crean, um, Crean Aurora. I don't know. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that last bit, but that the last track on the album, which I'm pretty sure is from memory. I believe it is an instrumental. There might be some lyrics on there, but I remember it being quite heavily instrumental. I could be wrong though, but I remember that being sort of the song I didn't really like. I like the least anyway. I don't think it's that bad of a song anyway. So without further ado, let's get on to the second album. So Paul McCartney's second album was Ram from 1971. Um, and for this was really hard in terms of picking, especially a least favorite track. Like I think when I was looking at this album, I kind of I kind of from the start had an idea of which one I wanted to pick. But in terms of my least favorite track for the album, that was a lot harder. But some great tracks on this album. You've got Too Many People, Three Legs, Ram On, Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey, Smile Away, Heart of the Country, Monkberry Moon Delight, Backseat of My Car. But I think the my favorite track would probably have to be Too Many People. I think that's just a really great number on the album. I love the vocals by Paul, especially. The drumming I think is really good in it as well. As far as least favorite track, yeah, this is really hard, but I think I'll probably have to go with Long Haired Lady, just because I think it's kind of I don't think it needs to be as long as it is. And some of the I believe it's the Linda McCartney like sections of the song are just not kind of bring the song down quite a bit for me. But a great album overall for sure. And it was very hard to sort of narrow down my least favorite song. Up next, we have Wildlife, the first Wings album, and I'm including the Wings of McCartney's career for this discography. Just because I just remembered I didn't state that at the start of the video. But without further ado, on to Wildlife from 1971. And this was I was pretty certain on which one to pick for my favorite track, and I'll go for "Dear Friend," which closes the album. I think it's just a really sort of really well written song. There's in terms of they don't go overboard in terms of production or in terms of like instruments used. It's just mainly a piano and I think there's a bit of a sort of a drum hi hat in there a bit. It's sort of a really beautiful song actually. Um, as far as least favorite tracks, I'd probably have to go with Bit Bop just because it doesn't really say much and it just gets a bit repetitive. If I'm being honest. Aside from that, the rest of the tracks are just sort of there. I wouldn't say there's many sort of terrible. It's one of the times where the songs aren't necessarily that they don't stand out, from his solo career. But when you listen to them on their own, they're fine songs. I think. Now we're on to Red Rose Speedway from 1973. Definitely a step up, I'd say. I think in terms of my favourite track from this album, I'd have to say My Love. I think that really sort of stands out to me as the best song on here lyrically as well. And just I think it's just sort of a classic Wing song. I definitely, it was really successful at the time of its release, and just a really beautiful song. I think one of Paul McCartney's best love songs. As far as sort of a least favorite track goes on here, I'd probably have to say Loop, First Indian on the Moon. Just again a song that I really don't care for, and I would, I happily skip. I mean, definitely one of the weaker McCartney solo tracks, I think overall, if I'm being honest. And the rest of the album's pretty solid as well. The next album up on the discography is Bound on the Run, also from 1973. Um, Hailed as one of McCartney's best, and I have to agree. So many great songs on here. It's really hard to pick one, but I think I will go for Jet as my personal favorite track on here. It just rocks this song. I really love it. I think it's fantastic. I love Paul McCartney's vocals on this song as well. They're just fantastic, and I don't think words can really do Jet justice. It is one of my favourite Paul McCartney slash Wing songs. It's just fantastic. I really love the energy, and it just really, really rocks. I love that song. As far as a least favourite, this was also pretty hard. I'd probably have to say Mamunia. It's not a bad song at all. I just think it's sort of because of the quality of songs on this album. It sort of is unfortunately near the bottom, but by no means is Mamunia a bad song at all. Next on the discography, we have Venus and Mars from 1975. Another really good album. Hard to really pick a favourite from this. However, after much thought, chopping and changing, because there's so many great tracks on here. Obviously, you got Venus and Mars, I really love, Rock Show, Magneto Titanium Man, Letting Go, the Venus and Mars reprise, Spirits of Ancient Egypt, Medicine Jar. Call Me Back Again, this is what the man said, are all songs I really, really love. I think I'll go for Call Me Back Again. One of the first sort of Wing songs I remember ever really listening to. And I just love McCartney's vocals on it. It's a really, really fantastic song. As far as sort of least favorite, I mean, I'm kind of gonna have to cop out a bit here just because it's such a good album, but I'm gonna have to go for the Crossroads theme on the end of the album. I just don't really care much for that. A lot of people are gonna say that's a cop out, but again, it was really hard for me, so I've gone with that one. So yeah, Crossroads. Well, Crossroads gets to the bottom of the pile. Up next, we have At the Speed of Sound from 1976, and they actually started to incorporate more of the other band members onto this album. Obviously, there were a couple of contributions from Denny Lane and Jimmy McCulloch on Venus and Mars. They each got a song. However, there's more contributions here on At the Speed of Sound. We've obviously got a couple of Denny Lane tracks, Jimmy McCulloch, and a Joe English sort of lead vocal track. But anyway, another hard album to sort of choose my favourite. However, I think I probably will go for Beware My Love. I love the guitar on that. I love McCartney's vocals. It's just a really great song. I think a lot of the components of the song are just really good. As far as a least favourite track, I think by quite a mile it would have to be Cook of the House, which is sung by Linda McCartney. Just not a very good song. Really nothing to it. I really do not care at all for that song, if I'm being honest. Next, we look at 1978's London Town by Wings. A really, really good album. I think this is very underrated, actually. As far as my favourite track for this album, I'd go with I'm Carrying, a great acoustic number by Paul. Really great lyrics and just really beautifully sung and written, I think. Now, as far as least favourite track, honestly, the whole album I think is pretty great. But I think I would probably have to say Cufflink would be my least favorite. The only real song on the album I don't really care for, simply just because it's more just sort of a instrumental sort of link track between Backwards Traveller and the Denny Laing song Children, Children. It just really doesn't do much for me. I've never really been that huge on sort of link songs anyway, because I think a lot of them are quite sort of pointless. So yeah, this kind of falls into that category a bit. Doesn't really do much for me, but the album as a whole, I think, is really, really good. Now we're on to 1979's Back to the Egg, and I'd say one of the weaker Wings albums, but still, I'd still say a good album as overall. Um, I'd say as far as sort of the best track on the album, I would definitely say it's Getting Closer. It really rocks that number. Really just love the vocal on that, the harmonies as well. Really just rocks in my opinion. A really, really great song. As far as the sort of the worst track on here, the weakest track, my least favorite. Um, I think about it a bit, and there's just a couple of, and again, I know this is a bit of a cop out. There's a couple of link tracks on here, so for example, like you have like Reception and the Broadcast. I'd probably just have to go with, I guess, the Broadcast. I mean, because at least with Reception, I kind of see that as the start of the album, and it sort of like introduces things. So I guess that you can kind of argue its position on the album. I just don't see the much need for sort of the Broadcast. It's just sort of in the middle of the side two, and it's just a bit. I could live without it, really, if I'm being honest. So yeah. But this is the final Wings album on this on the discography, so we'll go back to more of the Paul McCartney exclusive albums now. Now we're on to Paul McCartney in the 80s, and we kick off with McCartney 2, which is the second Paul McCartney album to follow. And this is a bit of an interesting album, really. As far as my favourite song goes, I mean, I'd have to say One of These Days, the closing track to the album. A really nice acoustic number. Um, one of the I think because on this album there's quite a few instrumentals which I really just don't care for. Like you've got sort of like most of the second side is pretty much just sort of instrumental tracks. So I could pick one of those, but because most of the sort of the tracks with vocals are quite good, apart from one track. And there's one track on this album that I dislike even more than the instrumentals on this album. Definitely one of my least favorite. Well, yeah, definitely one of my least favorite Paul McCartney tracks. And I never understood. I'm honestly genuinely surprised that it actually got released as a single. I'm genuinely astonished because I just think it's one of the it's just terrible. I mean, and there are actually people who genuinely really like this song, and I still just can't. I just don't understand it. And that's Temporary Secretary. Oh, it just annoys me so much. I find I usually see myself as being someone when it comes to sort of solo Beatles and Beatles stuff. I'm usually like the majority of the stuff because it's just sort of I don't know. I find they just sort of cater to stuff that I like. Not Temporary Secretary. This is one of the few McCartney songs I just really, really just do not like. It's just I just find it so fucking irritating. Anyway, rant over. Let's get back onto the next album. Now we're on to 1982's Tug of War, a masterpiece in my opinion. But yeah, just some really, really fantastic tracks on this album. I'm finding it really hard to sort of narrow it down because I feel like I'm doing any of these disservice. But I'd say my favourite track on the album would have to be Here Today, just one of Paul McCartney's best tracks of all time. I'd say it's definitely up there for me. A great acoustic number, great production by George Martin with the sort of it has a very sort of yesterday-esque kind of vibe, I think, to it. A song obviously about John Lennon, sort of a conversation that Paul never had with him, obviously because before John died, so it's quite a sort of sad song. As far as the least favorite song, I mean, I could sort of cheat and say the "Be What You See" link, but I'm actually not going to say that song because I mean, I just can't really give it. It's only like 34 seconds. Again, I don't see the point of the song, but yeah, that's a different point. If I wasn't to pick that, I would say probably "Dress Me Up as a Robber." Not a terrible song, but in comparison to the rest of the album, it just falls kind of flat a bit. It's still sort of a fun song, I guess, but definitely the weakest on the album for sure. Now we're on to 1983's Pipes of Peace, and this is kind of this is the thing. Paul McCartney in the 80s overall, I just think was very, very inconsistent. As far as a sort of like obviously as I said, McCartney 2 didn't do much for me. Tug of War I thought was brilliant. This one is just a very mixed. As far as favorite track, ooh, this is hard because there's a few the songs I do like on here are very close together in terms of like how I love them. I probably would go for Keep Undercover. I think that's a really great song. It's really grown on me a lot recently, actually. So I'll probably go for Keep Undercover. As far as a least favorite track, I would say Tug of Peace. Easily, just really not a good song. Sort of a mix of Pipes of Peace and Tug of War, and it just really doesn't work. I just don't think it's a good song at all. And yeah, second side especially is not that great. There's a couple of stuff on side two that's alright, but side two is very very mixed. I think. Um, yeah. So anyway, let's get on to the next 1980s Paul McCartney album. Now we're on to 1984's Give My Regards to Broad Street. Sort of the soundtrack for the film. So what he's sort of done here is there's a couple of new tracks here, but there's a lot of redos of there's sort of some songs from his solo career already. So you got like Wanderlust and So Bad, which are obviously on previous albums, and then you've got him doing quite a lot of the old Beatles songs. Yeah, I mean, my favorite track is definitely "No More Lonely Lights." That's a "No More Lonely Nights." It's a really, really great track. Actually, I really love that. It's definitely one of my favorite McCartney tracks. Actually, in terms of my least favorite, I'm gonna go for an actual song here because there's a few sort of instrumental things. I will go for um the sort of new sort of 80s version, I guess you could say, of the Long and Winding Road. I just really don't care for it. I just don't like the way way Paul McCartney's gone about doing this song. I mean, the only real sort of Beatles cover I really sort of like on here is Here, There, and Everywhere, because that's sort of a nicely done new version. But anyway, yeah, I definitely say my least favorite on the album is probably the Long and Winding Road sort of redo. I just don't really care for it at all. Now we get on to 1986's Press to Play in the discography. And just sort of as a quick sort of my kind of opinions quickly. Pretty sort of mixed album. However, some good tracks on here. So I will say my favourite on this album is the opener, that is Stranglehold. As far as a least favourite track, as I said, it's quite a lot of mixed stuff, as I said. So there's quite a lot of sort of average tracks, I would say. There's not much that's actually terrible, I'd say. But the one track that I really don't really like that much is Pretty Little Head. I just think it goes on way too long, and it just doesn't. There's just nothing to it really. It really doesn't do anything for me, if I'm being honest. So yeah, let's get on to the next album. Now we're on to 1988's Chopper PCCCP. Just mainly a songbook cover album. I think this is definitely one of the weaker ones. I've seen better albums like this style done better. Paul did a better one later on. It wasn't entirely covered as the one that I'm thinking of, but mostly was. As far as favorite track on this album, I'd probably have to say 20 Flight Rock. Just because I think I mean, there's like a couple of really good tracks, really good covers that I do like on here, but the rest I just think are pretty average or forgettable. I think as far as the least favorite, I'd probably have to say Midnight Special. Just doesn't really do much for me, if I'm being honest. And a lot of the singing style on this album in general is just quite weird from Paul. I don't know what, it's just a bit odd. It's hard to explain, but I'm not huge on it, if I'm being honest. Yeah, without further ado, let's get on to the next album. Now we're on to Flowers in the Dirt from 1989, and definitely a big success for McCartney, especially after a certainly mixed and started to sort of commercially. There's a couple of his albums not do so well. For example, Press to Play didn't do very well. And this is a really, really good album. I think as far as a favourite track on here goes, I'd have to go for the opener, My Brave Face. Really rocking song, love the guitar, love the energy, and the lyrics and vocals from Paul in this song, just fantastic. It was quite hard to pick a least favourite because it's just really not a bad song on here. So I decided to go with How Many People. I don't hate the song at all. I do like the song. I just think it's just sort of the one that out of all songs of the album, I just sort of just don't really connect with as much, honestly. But still a very good song though. So let's get on to the next album in the discography. Up next, we have 1993's Off the Ground. And it's a really solid album overall. I think as far as a favourite track on here, I'd have to go with the title track, Off the Ground. I just think it's a really rocking track. It really kicks the album off really right. I love the guitar work in it. I love the beat and sort of the clapping parts sections of the song as well. I just really love that song. It's really kicks off the album really well. As far as a least favorite track for the album, I'd probably have to go with the closing track to the album, which is "Come On People." I just think the song anyway isn't anything that special. It's not a bad song by any means, but it just doesn't really do that much for me. And it's just really drags on. It's nearly 8 minutes, and I really don't think it's needed. If I'm being honest, it really could have been cut down just to sort of a 3 4 minute song. But a good album overall, I would say. Though. I mean, but yeah. Anyway, without further ado, let's get on to the next album. Now we're on to one of the critically acclaimed McCartney masterpieces, Flaming Pie, and I'd have to agree. It's a great album overall. As far as sort of favourite track from Flaming Pie, it was really hard because there's just so many great tracks on here. But I think I would probably say that my favourite track on Flaming Pie would have to be Some Days. A really great number. Love the lyrics on this song. I just think it's just one of the best written songs on this album and from Paul's solo career. So I would have to go with Some Days as my favourite track from this album. As far as the least favourite, this is very hard because I don't really actually hate any of the songs on here. There's not really any songs I dislike. I'd probably just have to say probably Really Love You. That's sort of my least favourite track. It goes on a bit too long slightly and it's just not there's not much to it, but still I still do like the song. I think it's a good song. So let's get on to the next album. Now we're on to Run Devil Run from 1999, I should say. A really good album. I think this is definitely one of the most underrated McCartney albums for sure. I think we see people put it quite low on their sort of rankings. I really love it personally. So as far as the favourite track on here, I'd have to go with All Shook Up, which is a cover of one of the famous Elvis Presley songs. Just really love the sort of way Paul's gone about it. Just the guitar on it is brilliant. I love the guitar riffs he does on it. It's fantastic. Really love that song. As far as the sort of least favorite track on here, I mean, it was hard because I don't really hate any of these tracks. I'd probably have to go with Coquette. Just sort of, I don't know. It just again, it's a song that I think. Oh, I don't know. I can't really explain it. I think it just doesn't really do much for me personally. So that's the '90s section of Paul McCartney done. So let's get on to the 2000s. Next, we look at 2001's Driving Rain. Kind of mixed in opinion. I think a lot. It's more. It was one of those albums at the time where I think a lot of critics quite liked it, but the fans and sort of nowadays, a lot of people just don't really rate this album that much. I'm sort of in the middle on it. I think it's just sort of an okay album. As far as sort of favorite track goes, because there are some really good songs on here, I would have to go with Your Loving Flame. I think that's a really, really beautiful song. It's really well done. Just brilliant, brilliant stuff. As far as the least favorite track, because there are quite a lot of I mean, there's not really many songs on this album that I really sort of dislike, um, but I would say there's one of the tracks I do kind of not like from this album actually. It's the song Heather, and it's not just because it's about Heather Mills, who is obviously less about her the better, but it's also just not a good song. Like it's just sort of it's more sort of an instrumental, but it's just I don't know, it just doesn't really do anything for me. I just don't think it's a very good instrumental anyway, if I'm being honest. So yeah, I would say that's probably my least favourite. So next we'll look at the next release from Paul. Up next we have 2005's Chaos and Creation in the Backyard, a fantastic album. As far as a favourite track on here, it was again very hard to narrow down, but I think I would have to go with the closer to the album. Anyway, a really beautiful song. I just love the piano and Paul's lyrics and vocals are just fantastic on the track. As far as the least favourite track, this was actually surprisingly quite easy because pretty much nearly all the songs I really enjoy. However, there's one song I think just kind of did stand out was the weak track on the album, and I still do like this track a lot. I think it is a fun song. However, it was pretty obvious that it's just I think quite by a fair bit the weakest track, and that's English Tea. A fun little song, but it just in comparison to the rest of the album, it doesn't really say anything profound. There's just not much that's sort of really outstanding about it, but it's still a fun, nice little song. But I would say it's by quite a bit the weakest on the album. So next we'll get on to the next album in the discography. Now we're on to Memory Almost Full from 2007. Really, really great album. One of the best Paul McCartney albums, I'd say. Some really fantastic tracks on here. As far as a favourite song on the album, I'd have to go for The End of the End. Really profound song. I really like the lyrics and sort of the subject matter, sort of about Paul, how he wants to be sort of remembered when he dies and that sort of thing, and sort of how he's not really that afraid of death, which I think is it's a really sad song, but it's also just really I really do think it's a really well written song and everything. As far as least favorite track, I would have to go for Sea or Sunshine. Definitely the weakest by a fair bit. It's not terrible, but it just is a bit on the cheesy side. Really doesn't do that much for me. I think it's by quite a fair bit the weakest track on this album. Next, we look at Kisses on the Bottom from 2012. Mainly it's just an album sort of covers songbook. However, there's one sort of original McCartney composition on here, and I'd probably say that's my favourite, and that's the song My Valentine. I think that's just a really well written song, really nice sort of melody, and everything about it I just really, really, really enjoy. So I'd probably say that's my favourite track. As far as the least favourite track, it's kind of hard because there's not really any bad songs on the album. I think it's a pretty solid album overall. But I'd probably have to, I don't know. I mean, if I had to really go off sort of how I feel now, I guess, I probably would have to go with probably The Inchworm, I think. Um, but again, I still kind of like all the songs on the album, really. Anyway, let's get on to the next album. Next, we'll look at New from 2013. Really strong album overall. I think it's definitely one of those examples of Paul McCartney producing sort of a more modern sort of spin on his own work, which I think really shows in this album. It's really well done. As far as a favourite track on this album, it's really really tough because I think there's two tracks in particular on New that I really can't really decide between. It is very tough because I think the two tracks that I really sort of chop and change between um, this album are On My Way to Work and the song Save Us. However, I think I'll probably go for On My Way to Work, just more of a sort of, it reminds me of a very like Beatle-esque kind of song. So I'll probably go with that one because I think the lyrics are more sort of inventive. As far as the sort of least favorite song, I'd probably have to go for Looking at Her. A nice little song, but doesn't do a whole lot for me. I think it's definitely probably the weakest for me on the album. So that's it for the video. Thank you for watching, guys. This Paul McCartney discography. Hope you enjoyed. I'll probably do this sort of thing in the near future. I'll try and do it at some point. I'll try and do it with not like a variety of artists and bands at some point. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my main channel if you haven't. Follow my new Twitter, my ask.fm. And yeah, as I said, once again, thanks for watching, guys.